Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is Kristina Holzweiss. Kristina is a high school EdTech librarian who was selected as the 2015 School Librarian of the Year, a Library Journal Mover and Shaker, a National School Board 20 to Watch, and a New York State School Librarian of the Year. Her library was selected as the National School Library of the Year in 2024. Welcome, Kristina.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. And I will let everybody know she has won an amazing number of awards. They'll all be in the show notes at the end. These were the ones that were definitely standouts for sure. But you'll get a chance to see all those, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So why don't we start, Kristina, with you telling us a little bit of how you came to where you are. Talk about your education, talk about the career path.
Well, I was an English major and I was going to be a computer science minor. It was in the late 80s, and I thought, I was really interested in computers back then. Didn't have one, only had one class in high school, but I really wanted to be a computer science minor. I took two classes of computer science and then I switched over to Spanish because I knew Spanish very well. I just did not have the foundation for computer science back then, but I've always been interested. So I became an English teacher. I was a seventh grade English teacher for 9 years. And during that time, you can take other classes for credits to go up the pay scale. I never wanted to be an administrator, but I was always interested in technology. So I went back to school and I pursued a certification in educational technology. And I discovered PowerPoint and I taught my kids HTML and I was so excited. But they weren't hiring in the early 2000s for ed tech specialists or professional developers. So I said, well, what is a profession where I can take my love of reading, my love of technology, and I'd really like to do professional development? School libraries. So I was a school librarian for many years, and now I'm on a team where I am the EdTech librarian. So I'm basically an EdTech specialist, but I'm kind of a librarian, kind of like an English teacher, kind of like everything rolled into one. And I went back to school and I became computer science education certified. Will I ever use it? I don't know, but at least I have that certification so I can help kids with their coding. And I really think it's important to promote technology with our students and reading and have a nice balance. So I had like that left and the right brain going on.
Your story is a little bit my story of how I got an admin credential. One never knows what the world will bring, especially as a librarian, because sometimes the jobs go away or sometimes they change, and it's never a bad thing to be certified in a few different areas.
And from what I've heard, people who go for admin really learn a lot about the big picture of schools and how they work. And I think you are able to speak to your stakeholders in a different way because you
Right.
have the experience. It's just that I never wanted to pursue that position. And I just, I liked libraries and technology and English, and I already had so many credits that to go back to school right now, I really actually right now I need to save money for my kids for college, not for me.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I've been there for sure. So let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite books. You co-wrote Hacking School Libraries, 10 Ways to Incorporate Library Media Centers into Your Learning Community. I love this book. Can you tell me how it came into being?
Well, I love the Hack Learning series. I don't know if you've read them, but every one of them has that same kind of pattern where they have problems, how you can solve them short term and how you can solve them long term. So I've always loved that series of books. And, I was thinking about writing a book that I wanted to have when I was starting out as a school librarian. What would be a nice quick read with practical advice? And I thought about the other publishers that are in the library field, but I settled on Hack Learning because, again, I love the formula, the layout of the books, and I also wanted a library book on the shelf with other books about leadership, about technology, about various things. And I felt like that was a way to advocate. The other publishers in the library field are wonderful. And one day, if the right opportunity comes by, maybe I'll pursue that. But at the time, I looked at this as a point of advocacy, and getting the book out there for other people to see, and hopefully administrators.
One of the things that I liked about the book was just the fact that it is part of the Hack Learning series, because it's great to be published by one of the outstanding library publishers out there. It probably limits exposure, though. This is part of a larger something, and I think that's good for our profession always to be part of a larger something.
Exactly, exactly.
One of the chapters talks about shaking up policies, procedures, and protocols. I personally enjoy doing those things, shaking them up, but sometimes that's the stuff that gets you in a little bit of trouble. Tell me about that a little bit. Maybe use an example from your own library work.
It's difficult when you are going into a new library that already has established norms. They could be established by the school librarian there, or it could be established by the administrators. So in my first school library position, I was brand new, and it was the early 2000s, and we collected fines. It wasn't much, but we did collect fines from kids. So when I first arrived there, again, I was brand new librarian, brand new to the school. You don't want to shake things up too much. You want to make sure that you're in tune with the environment, with the culture, and you're also looking for tenure. You're looking to fit in. Um, you don't know what you can change. So you really have to have your ears and eyes open. But I remember the kids would want to go to like a basketball game just to sit in the crowd, and they would have to. I was asked to print a list of overdue books, and the kids would have to pay for those fines before they could be in that crowd.
Mm,
It didn't sit well with me, but again, I was brand new, and I was trying to learn the culture and the lay of the land. And my next school, there were no fines. As soon as I walked in, there were no fines. So I said, "Oh yeah, then this is right. This is the place." And so we never collected fines. We did encourage kids to pay for lost books, but I knew that it was going to be honestly a pain to collect the money and then buy new books and things like that. And I asked them, if you could just get a hardcover copy of the book that I could put back on the shelf, then that eliminates the middleman. That makes it easier for me. It makes it more immediate. They can go on Amazon, they can go on in Target, they can go anywhere, and they can get that book, and I can immediately put it on the shelf. That was actually easier for me. And I would process it by hand, and that would be fine. It made it more immediate. And kids who just couldn't pay for those lost books, I spoke to the school counselor to see what the situation was, spoke to the students, and sometimes we made other accommodations for those kids. Books are expensive, and
right.
libraries, we need to have that inventory for all of our kids. But I'd rather lose a book than a reader. And so I would encourage kids to, find their lost books or replace it with new ones. But you understand, you want kids to come and take the books out. Are you really going to keep a kid from taking a book out because they lost a book as a kindergartner? It's really not worth it.
It's a little bit ding ding ding, you hit on it. Would you rather lose a book than a reader? In a previous life, I was a manager of library services for a large school district, 90-ish libraries and 115 or so
Wow.
people. One of the first things I did was I said, no more library fines. Particularly, I would see some of these things where it's your example. Okay, so the kid lost a book in first grade and they haven't been able to check out a book since, and they're now in fourth grade. Who does this? I was talking to one of my friends from a public library, and she said, I'd stop fines tomorrow if I could, but they have a whole different political structure. I waved a wand and was able to do that, but others not so much.
I have a little secret. I'm a really bad person at returning books. I'm always late. And I remember when I was in high school, I brought in a duffel bag of books in June because I wanted to get my diploma.
Oh,
So
right.
I am that person who, those fines were kind of made for me for a while there. So, my public library doesn't have fines, and thank God for that. I just received a notification on my phone the other day that they're going to automatically renew my books. Thank you.
Oh,
So
nice.
that is my secret. I am that person.
Absolutely. I was a middle school teacher librarian as well. And I would hear from my high school colleagues when some of my former students got to their senior year and needed to graduate. But otherwise, and we can fix those things. Often we'd had a textbook adoption in the meantime because we did textbooks as well. Often there'd be a textbook adoption, and we didn't even want their old textbook back
Hmm.
because it was now outdated, and you want kids to graduate, and so you work things out. You also have written a number of other books. Which one stands out for you? If you want to tell me about one, which one would that be? And I should tell everybody, we're going to have all of our books are going to be in show notes or on the Golden Library's website, so you can see all of that.
Well, I do have the three series. Two are from Scholastic, they're Makerspace books, and two are from Callisto Media. There is not one book that stands out, but I'll tell you about the experience. The Scholastic books, they had reached out to me because I had won School Library of the Year that year, and they knew that I was a maker librarian. So they wanted some Makerspace books for kids. And so there are two series. One's, I would say K through 2, and the other one's 3 through 5. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I turned around those 8 books in less than a year. They had to get those
Wow.
done. Yeah, so it was very quick. But what's really special about those books is it was actually a family effort. So I wrote the books, and the younger series that has the pictures, the photographs in them, my sister was the photographer. And
Hmm.
my son, those are his hands making the projects. So we
Oh,
would
how
go to my
lovely.
sister's house in her basement and put up the lights and everything. And she took photographs of my son. So it was actually a team effort. And some of the photos of the children, those are photos taken in my actual library. And those are my kids in those photos and their friends. So that's why those books are really important to me. They're also really important because when I was growing up, I was raised by my grandparents who didn't speak English.
Hmm.
They were Ukrainian, and my grandfather only had a fourth grade education, and my grandmother could only sign her name. And so
Wow.
but my mom was a single mom at the time, and she was working 2 jobs, and I was raised by them. And so getting to the library was difficult when my mom was at home. And a side story, the bookmobile would come to my grandparents' house, and my grandparents could not read the books on that bookmobile. They were all in English. And like I said, my
Hmm.
grandfather could read, but my grandmother couldn't. But every time that bookmobile came, my grandfather went into the garden and packed up, picked some tomatoes and packed them up. And my grandmother went to the garden and she cut some roses off the bushes, and they gave them to me to give as gifts to the librarian because they valued education so much and reading so much, and they knew that they couldn't do it, but they wanted to thank that librarian. So they had a nice relationship, even though my grandparents couldn't read those books. So fast forward to those makerspace books. I wanted to write books that were simple for kids to read on their own or with their families if they could, with just objects around the house or things that they can get at a discount store that they can make on their own, because I knew what it was like to be in a home where I was raised by my grandparents, and my mom did the best that she could, and I wanted to write books that were for kids who could be more independent. The other 2 books were by Callisto Media, and those were books about transportation. The first book was about trains, and my sister actually works for our railroad in New York. So that was a great connection. And the Plains book was actually written. My father was not well, and he was in Colorado, and I went to visit him, and I would visit him during the day or speak to him during the day, and at night I would go back to the hotel and I would work on the Airplanes book. So that was important to me too, because it was kind of like a therapy, and it was something that I was doing at that time. And my father-in-law actually worked for Pan Am years ago. So there are a lot of connections with that airplane book as well.
Excellent. One other book that you didn't mention, book, sort of. Demco's School Library Planner, which is just a wonderful thing for librarians to have. Tell us about that.
Well, one of my favorite shows is Shark Tank, and I'm always thinking about what can make people's lives easier and what can make librarians' lives easier. And I have many mentors in my life. And one of my mentors I spoke to and I said, I have this idea. It's actually a tear off sheet, a calendar where it has a tip for every day. It's a tear off. And she said, well, that's a really cool idea, but what can you make out of it? Can you make origami? Can you make something out of it? I said, I don't know. She said, let me put you in touch with Demco. And so she did. And I worked with Heidi at Demco, who is wonderful. And we went back and forth with ideas and then prototyping. And the prototype of the planner, I had worked in Canva, playing with some pages.
Hmm.
And then I imported them to Book Creator. I don't know if you know Book Creator, but it's one of my favorite tools because in Book Creator, it actually looks like it's flipping pages. I wanted to see how it would look in real life. So that was a prototype. And then I've been working with Heidi for years since the very beginning. I'm always thinking about how to make it better, what she sees that people need. I have a Facebook group of just people who are using the planner, and actually now some people who haven't bought the planner. I look for their feedback. There's a QR code for the survey. This is basically crowdsourced ideas. To make it better for the user, I need to speak to the user. I need to speak to the people actually using it. And so a lot of ideas of that planner is because they were librarian requests.
And was this year's the fourth one?
This is the third year. We're actually working on our fourth. Yeah.
Nice. So because you have to be way ahead of the game for
Yes,
this.
we do. I'm already starting.
And where can people buy those? Straight from Demco?
Straight from Demco, and if you're in Canada, there's a Demco supplier in Canada as well. But yeah,
Mm.
they're actually I worked with the designer Demco. It's an exclusive with Demco because I work with the designer on the content and then the layout. So Demco actually has a great design team, and they design their products. They just don't sell their products. Those products that they make, they're prototyped in their labs. They're designed by graphic designers. So when you work with Demco, you're not just working with a store, you're working with a team of innovators and designers.
I want to talk a little bit about your Facebook group, School Libraries Rock. That's how you and I connected. And it is going like gangbusters. How many members does it have now?
It has about 16,000.
Yeah, just amazing. If anybody has ever tried starting a Facebook group, that is hard.
It
That
is
that
hard.
that is absolutely challenging. How did you get the idea to start this, and how have you grown it the way it has?
Well, I read a lot of business books and I learned how to market on my own. And so that Facebook group actually started as Hacking School Libraries. So it was a Facebook group for the book.
Oh,
But then I started thinking about it. There are other people out there who are not librarians, but I want to invite them too. And Hacking School Libraries just didn't seem like a title that
mm,
was inviting to other educators. Where School Libraries Rock, you could be a reader, you could be an English teacher, you could be all kinds of people, administrators. I want all kinds of people to be in that group so they can see that school libraries matter, that they are important. And so that's why it's School Libraries Rock, only because it started as, our core are the people who have read the book, but then it's grown to other people. And actually, it's been a brain dump for me. When I find something cool and interesting, I put it in there. And it's kind of like my curation. And then I'm just, I don't really have time to blog that much. And so I feel like this is like quicker than a blog. You can see other information. And if I find something on Facebook or somewhere else, something that I didn't even come up with, I can still share it. And it doesn't have to be mine. It could be anyone's, and anyone could share. A blog is me talking to the world. A Facebook group is a community. So I really think
right.
that that's more important.
No, absolutely. And as I said, Bit of a challenge. I have done that in the past, and that is for every one that succeeds like yours, there are many, many, many that have eight members. So you have won an astounding number of awards. Congratulations on all of
Thank you.
those. Why do you think that has happened? Have you gone out thinking I'd like to win some awards, or does it one award build on another?
I'll tell you something. The first one was the Library of the Year, and I applied for that award for survival. My prior position, um, I was excessed. It was 2009. It was the housing crash. And so I was told that I was going to not be a middle school librarian anymore, full time, that they were going to put me in an elementary school part time. I would have a half day position. And at that time with the recession, my husband also lost his job and we were adopting our son. So we were coming from two full salaries to a half salary. And so in June that year, finally, my husband got a position and I had an interview in my last position that I was in on my 40th birthday. I didn't know I was getting the job. I just thought it was another interview. But while I was getting ready to leave the house, I received a phone call that I was a mother. So my
Wow.
40th birthday was my birthday. I became a mom and I basically got a new job. So, and elementary school librarians in New York State are not state mandated. So it doesn't matter if you're hired as elementary, middle, or high, it goes by seniority. So if they're accessing, you could be an elementary school librarian and become a high school librarian overnight, and then they can get rid of those elementary positions. So I applied for School Library of the Year, and I encourage people apply for awards. If they say you can apply for an award and not be nominated, apply on your own. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I applied for it because I felt like, I'd like some job security. And if I
Right.
want it, then I'm just being very practical about it. I know what it was like to lose my job. I know what it was like to have that fear of how I'm going to feed a family of three on a half salary.
Mm.
So again, the first school library of the year, it was only because I said, you know what, I have to, I have to apply. I don't want that to ever happen to me again. And so I was surprised when I won that one. I think it had a lot to do with my Students of Long Island Maker Expo, which was an event that I held in my school twice. And then I rented the lobby of a local museum. And we held it there as well. And back then, people weren't really doing that things. Now it's more commonplace. So I think that's what they saw. And then, when people see that, oh wow, she's School Library of the Year, then I guess they see, some value. And I do see a pattern, and I see a pattern, not just me, with other educators. One award comes, and then maybe another one will follow because you're doing great things, and maybe you're on a roll, or maybe they see, oh, you've won an award. Let's look into you a little more. So I do think that one does affect the other. The first one is hard to get. It's really
Right.
hard to get. But like I said, it was survival. It was really survival. I think applying for awards is a great advocacy tool. I think it promotes you and your school library. It shows the value to your administrators and your teachers. I mean, you're doing great things, whether you have awards or not. There are people doing amazing things. Just because they don't have that little
Yes.
trophy or like the gold star does not mean they're not doing great things. It just means that maybe they haven't applied for it, or maybe it's just not their time yet. So,
Right.
award, it says a lot, but it doesn't mean that, people who are not getting awards are not doing great things. I've seen amazing things from people who don't have awards. Amazing things.
Well, and sometimes from my own experience, some of the people not getting awards are doing things better than people who do. The people who do just went through the steps to get
Exactly.
there.
Exactly. That's why I highly recommend if an award says that you can apply, apply. Don't feel like there's anything that you're bragging or anything. You are advocating for your school library and you're doing great things. So don't have any reservations about it. Just go for it.
That's sort of my philosophy about library school scholarships as well. When I was in library school, I was also on the regional board for California School Library Association, and I discovered one interesting thing. No one applies. So I would apply. I'd get like $1,000. No one else applied, and I did this several times with that and with the university. And it takes some work to apply for
Hmm.
scholarships. It takes some work to apply for awards, but it can pay off for you for sure.
And I find when you apply for an award, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn about the things that your weaknesses, you learn about your strengths. And so I think that the whole process of reflection as when you're applying is a wonderful way to, think about your program. And if you don't win one year, you can just improve your application for the next year. And you can also use that application, some of those parts, for other awards. So it's not like a waste of time.
Well, and one of the things that worked for me, I was wanting to go to our state conference, and it was one of the years where budgets were really tight. I'm everywhere. And they said, well, I don't know. I said, did I mention that our superintendent is getting an award for how he supports libraries that I nominated him for?
Mm.
And he deserved it. He
Mhm.
got us library budgets. That we still have those library budgets today. That was the difference. Oh, okay, we'll find the money.
Mhm.
We
Sometimes you just have to ask. Sometimes you
Exactly. You just
just
have
have
to
to
ask.
ask. What's the worst that happens? They say no.
And we're in public education. They say no a lot. You got to get used to that a little bit. So, moving on, what is a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
Well, I will say so 2 books, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble.
Hmm.
When I was a kid. That was a hot book, and I had to wait in line to get my hands on that book. And when I got my hands on that book, I was so excited. So just the excitement of getting that book that everyone wanted, and it was finally my turn, was so exciting. And I just think it's a beautiful story. And then The Giver is not from my childhood. When I was an English teacher, I taught that book every year. I will. That's one of my favorite books. It's just one of the most amazing books of all time. And this summer, I actually sat with my daughter and we read Gathering Blue, which is the second book.
Right.
And so we'll continue with the quartet. Just I looked forward to teaching that book every spring to my kids because it was so exciting watching them. The light bulbs went off and the connections that were going on and the stories they were telling me. I learned so much every year. I always say it's a good day when I teach, but it's a great day when I learn. And just learning from the kids every year from what they brought to that book made it exciting. So it may not be from my childhood, but I love The Giver. And like I said, Sylvester and Magic Pebble has a special place in my heart.
What are you reading now?
I read business books. I read business psychology books. I read books about time management. So again, the planner. So that's what I do. I watch a lot of videos about team building, and like I said, a business psychology, like how to make like marketing stick and getting messages stick. I feel like I can apply to my teaching to how to make my teaching stick. So
Nice.
that's I always think of again a lot of business psychology books, Simon Sinek, the Heath brothers. So again, a lot of nonfiction only because I like to. It helps my teaching.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you, Christina, for coming on the Book Flood podcast. I will have all sorts of information in the show notes, but also up on goldenlibraries.com. Want to remind everybody, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast at. Again, thanks, Christina.
Thank you so much.